I just wanted to welcome everyone here. Joyanna knows this, I just did the same spiel last week. So I wanted to welcome everyone here to the Firehouse Arts Center. My name's Elaine Waterman, and I am the executive director here. The Firehouse is a nonprofit art center in the heart of downtown Longmont on 4th and Kaufman, providing life-enhancing art experiences through art exhibitions, art education, and cultural events. Our Artist Talks are casual chats with artists, curators, members of the creative community, and creative entrepreneurs with a focus on how to build community within the arts. Firehouse Artist Talks give the community a chance to ask questions and get to a deeper level with the art on our walls. We are taping this talk, and you can find it on our YouTube channel along with our past Artist Talks and presentations. I wanted to start with a couple of updates from the Firehouse. We do have life drawing. Actually, tonight is long pose, so it's 3 hours. And then we have our weekly Monday life drawing tomorrow. We have yoga on Wednesdays, and poetry night is this Friday. Please visit our calendar on the website for more events. I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsors, the LDDA, Longmont Creative District, Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, the Longmont Community Foundation, the Community Foundation of Boulder, the Boulder County Arts Alliance, and to Colorado Creative Industries. We couldn't connect our community to creative and life-changing art experiences without your help. If you would like to donate to support our programming and exhibits, please visit our website at firehouseart.org. And lastly, in the spirit of healing, the Firehouse acknowledges and honors the Arapaho tribe, the original people of the land upon which the Firehouse sits. We also wish to acknowledge all other indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. It is because of their hardships and sacrifices that we are able to be here sharing this art with you today. The Firehouse believes that we can only grow when we have a better appreciation for the history, legacy, and contributions that the tribes have made, not just to this region, but to the nation. So I wanted to welcome our panelist, Joyanna Rose Gittings. And Joyanna works in contemporary watercolor and spills over into ceramics, fiber, murals, and classic automotive pinstriping. She owns Obra Arts, a bilingual studio gallery in Longmont's Creative District, whose directive is educating and advocating for artists in her diverse community. She currently serves as board president of East Boulder County Artists and bilingual instructor for the Firehouse Art Center's Art Attack program, and is also a member of the Creative District Committee. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I feel like the bio actually really just touches on a lot of what you do. Like, I feel like you do so much within the community. So I know that we'll probably get to it as we go down the list of questions, but I wanted to get started just talking about the exhibit that is on the walls here in Studio 64. So the title of this exhibit is Displaced. Did you kind of want to elaborate?
Sure. The idea came to me because I rewrite my artist statement almost constantly. Everything wants an artist statement, and every time I apply to something, I feel like it's inadequate. So I'm rewriting it constantly, and one of the first questions they ask you, one of the first things they tell you to address is the medium you work in and why you work in that medium. So I always was thinking, well, my main medium is watercolor, and that's my favorite one, so that's the one I talk about the most. And I was for a long time thinking about it as, why do I like the actual medium itself, the paint itself? And I used to talk about, how the pigment kind of settles in the crevices and you don't have complete control over it always, and it's not, I like the serendipity of it and the spontaneity of it and all of that. But then it occurred to me, and this happened maybe 6 months ago when I was rewriting another artist statement, that it's really about the water. More than it's about the pigment. It's about how the water pushes the pigment, how it can be very thick and pasty, almost like an acrylic consistency. It can be completely watery, like a really weak tea, and it can be just clear water. Sometimes too is used for different techniques. So it's really it's that freshness and that the flow of it. That's what really is appealing to me about watercolors. So that got me thinking about, well, what else does water do? Water influences so much of what we do and so much of how people have moved over time, and how, we're facing the lack of it now here where we live. It draws borders, and many places all over the planet, water forms a border between countries. And it leaves us when we pass on. The water drains from us. We're so much of us is made up of water, and we lose that. So all different kinds of aspects of it came kind of together in my wanting to make this body of work, which I composed. Like, all of these have been done in the last 3 months. I started the first one in December, late December. So I guess was it 4 months? When the exhibition went in, it was 3 months. So anyway, I started thinking about the different ways that we are pushed and kind of moved around in terms of people that we lose, we don't have any control over, I guess, in terms of how many people live in our community that have moved from other places, both foreign and domestic, and are, a lot of them in a lot of cases, not able to go back to their home. So that's a feeling of displacement. Through COVID and through the change in our normal day-to-day lives, how we are still having to adjust to changes in, what we all thought was the normal, everyday, just standard, how your day goes, it has changed for a lot of us. And what we thought was absolutely true is no longer absolutely true.
So we've been displaced out of our own routines.
Out of our own routines, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like out of our own skins, like we're so used to being in a certain way, and
I think we're seeing a lot of struggle with that. There's a lot of, stress because of that still. I mean, things are more expensive, and everybody's feeling stress, financially, and everybody's feeling stress, just of being afraid of disease, and everyone's lost people. We've all lost people. And I don't know anybody who that hasn't touched, and we're all feeling that loss very strongly still.
So you mentioned in what you were describing in your work, people that have been displaced and are in a different community now. I know, because we've had lots of discussions about this, but I know that you participated, I guess it was an exchange or a student exchange, and you were in Spain for a while.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I learned Spanish. Out of high school, after I graduated from high school, I spent a year in the Canary Islands in Tenerife in Spain, through the Rotary organization, Rotary Exchange Program. Lived with a family and was there for a year. So that time, having spent that time in another culture, completely formed my own new language, from Ohio, middle of Ohio, landlocked. We have a lake, but to a volcanic island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You couldn't go anywhere on the island without seeing the water. You couldn't go anywhere on the island without seeing that peak of the volcano and just knowing it's always there looming. Being in a mountainous region versus, flat plains, and a European culture versus, a Midwestern one. It was, that whole experience taught me what it's like to be in another place that's foreign. So I have a lot of empathy for that.
And you didn't know how to speak Spanish?
I didn't really know it much, no. I had 4 years in high school. How much do we all learn in 4 years in high school? I did not, but my host mom, when I was there, Lourdes, she would sit, like she ironed everything. So every laundry, she had a dryer, she never used it, she hung it all out. And when you hang, laundry in the sun, if you've ever done that, it gets kind of crusty and crunchy. So she ironed everything, sheets, towels, ironed everything, and that would soften it up. So underwear, everything, everything. She would sit and iron for like an hour or two every afternoon. And I would sit with her and she'd talk to me about politics or, what have you. And she'd say a word that I didn't understand and she'd explain it to me. And for the first several months of my being there, I went to school and I went out and I did stuff. I wasn't like sitting around the house all day, but those conversations with her. And also, we had a next door neighbor who was an English professor at the local university, and she offered to have me over, and so once a week I'd go over to her and she would kind of really get into the depths of the language with me and explain to me the subjunctive case and all the conjugations and things like that, and that helped me a lot figuring out the language, and that's why I'm so good at it now is because I had those people to help me when I was there. I learned it from a very scholastic kind of a standpoint, and so I still read all the time. I'm always learning new vocabulary and stuff. So that's a big part of why I do a lot of what I do with my studio and where it is.
And what do you do in your studio?
My studio is located downtown Longmont. It's in a retail building, so it's open to the public all the time. I mean, I can close the doors and hide in there if I want to, but most of the time there are people milling about the building. There's a coffee shop in there and some food, and there's a lot of other shops within this little kind of old-timey mini mall, kiosky kind of a feeling, vibe in the building. So people wander in and out as I'm sitting there working. My studio is open all the time, and that I didn't plan on it being that way. I was really just trying to find space outside of my house to be able to work because I have 4 kids at home, and getting any kind of brain space outside, while I'm at home, well, there's laundry to do, there's dishes to do, I couldn't do it. So I needed some space outside the house. And I found that space, and I ended up having the openness of it all the time. People wander in and they look at the art and they tell me stories. Like, they just open up. Something about talking to an artist, I don't know what it is, but people have told me just the most intimate kinds of what their hearts are feeling at the moment. People, you say, you wander into a shop, they say, oh, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. They don't tell you about their brother they just lost, but they do when they walk into my space, and that just it connects with people in a way that any other kind of shop doesn't, so it leads to a lot of paintings. I make a lot of work about some of the stories that people tell me, and the fact that there's a lot of Mexican-owned businesses in the building. I'm hearing both languages all day, and I can converse with everybody who walks through the building, and it's a very multicultural kind of a space. So it leads to a lot of connection, I think, in the community.
And so there are 2 threads that I wanted to branch off, but I heard you mention you have 4 children.
Yep.
And looking around at some of the pieces, but then also the little figurines, do you find that being a mother has affected the work that you make? Is it reflected in this work?
Absolutely. I don't make a lot of work specifically about a mother-daughter or mother-child connection necessarily. But what it has done to me is, I don't know, there's a little bit of, I have 2 kids who've had medical issues, epilepsy. And so I went from I had 4 kids, so I obviously like having kids and like them when they're little. I ran a daycare for 10 years before we moved here. So I watched a lot of other people's kids. And I was always a very low key kind of mother, like just very kind of chill. I'm kind of a free range kind of a parent. And then my kids got epilepsy, and that introduced a whole level of anxiety for me that I'd never had as a mother before. I mean, I grew up as the oldest of 5 kids, so my mom had twins when I was 11, and I was used to babies, and I had taken care of kids before, and I was totally chill about having my own. Like, I wasn't panicked, like, what do I do with this kid? I knew exactly what to do with this kid when I first had my own kids. But then having the medical issues threw a whole wrench in that whole attitude. And I became a nervous wreck, and constantly checking up on my kids and constantly fearing for their lives. And that fear I work out a lot in paint. That anxiety has been worked out a lot in the work that I'm doing about loss. That's all I have to say about that.
How does that relate to use of watercolor? Like, because I feel and I don't really know how to say it, but I feel like it's intrinsic to like that whole like maternal and holding and like.
I mean, you can't control it any more than you can control really what happens to your kids. You have to let go of that, and I think they are connected. I think I started using watercolor. Well, I mean, we also use watercolor in elementary school for kids. And then my grandfather was he was a watercolorist also, and when he passed, I inherited all his watercolor stuff. I wasn't necessarily into watercolor then, but I was an artist. I studied set design and costume design in college, and I've always painted, and I always loved to paint. So my grandma gave me his watercolor stuff when he passed away, and so I just started, because I had it. I just started using that. It was easy. It was not toxic. My kids were little at the time. I wasn't worried about them getting into it, and it was. Before I had a studio, I used to get in my car and drive somewhere and sit in my car and paint. That was easy to do with watercolor. Mm-hmm. So it started out kind of being, I mean, I had to use a lot of acrylic in college, and I'm not a big fan. I never have been really a big fan of acrylic. I don't know, it dries too fast. It doesn't give me time. So so I just started with the watercolor, and it became like, and then once I got into that, I didn't really wanted to use anything else.
Very cool.
That doesn't really have. I got a little bit off the topic,
well, no.
But yeah, it's all kind of connected. The convenience of having little kids and trying to paint, it gave me that convenience. So
the second thread that I heard from there is how your studio is in Old Town Marketplace, and is kind of enmeshed in the Latino and Hispanic community of Longmont. And you are involved you are the instructor for Art Attack, which is the bilingual art program that the Firehouse hosts at Casa de la Esperanza. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us more about that program?
Yes. Did Mario start it? So Mario,
that was way before
Mario Jose Olvera.
Did Mario start it?
I think that was supposed to me, but I feel like it was.
I think he did.
Okay.
He taught it for 13 years. And I don't know how it started necessarily, but I do know that Mario is a huge force for kids and youth, and has been in the community for a long time. He now runs Michantli, which is a dance and community kind of a space for youth in Boulder, and it's amazing in there. If you ever have a chance to stop in and just check it out, it's awesome. And so he was starting that whole endeavor and needed someone to take over the teaching of the class and it's taught at Casa de la Esperanza, which is a community center on the south side of the town. Mostly Hispanic. We've got a couple kids that don't speak a lot of Spanish, but for the most part, the classes are all taught in both languages. You hear both languages the whole time. The kids go to school and they speak a lot of English at school, and this is it's a great way for them to be able to kind of relax about that. Before I was here, I lived in Estes Park for several years and taught. I was a bilingual ESL para with the school district in Estes, and I did a lot of translating and interpreting for conferences, and worked with the community there. And I worked mainly with kindergarten and the kids that were coming in with no English at all, and I was there so that they could be understood, so that they were, they'd have somebody there. You can imagine how stressful it is to start kindergarten, period. And then to have the whole language barrier on top of that, those kids needed to have somebody there that understood what they needed. Somebody was being mean to them, and they couldn't communicate that to their regular classroom teachers. So I did a lot of kind of communications assistance in the school. So that taught me they would go home in the summertime and basically speak Spanish all summer, and then come back, and they have lost some of their English, and it was kind of, starting over, not completely, but it's a stressor. And for kids to be able to come in after school and come to an art class and be able to not only express themselves, but express themselves in whatever, form or fashion they find most comfortable, really does a lot for them. So it's great that they get the art, but it's also great that they've got a place that they can just be them, fully them, and not, the part that's required of them at home or the part that's required of them at school. They're just them. So.
And so you took this program over from Mario, and coming into the space, what was that experience like? Because
it wasn't real, because we started at the very beginning of COVID. So the whole first year I taught it. When I took it over, we were online. And for all of 2020, I taught virtually. So kids would hop on their computers. I saw them all on their screens, and I would drop off supplies at their houses, and just drop them. I never really saw them at their houses. I just dropped the supplies and left them, and then we'd hop online and have a class. So I got to see a little bit into their homes, which was great. But also, most of them were just set up, like they were for school, because they all had their computers at home for school. Most of them were virtually having virtual school also. So it was a little bit, I think we didn't have as many participants because they were online so much for school.
Yeah.
And being online some more in our class was too much for a lot of them, I think. But we had some really great kids that year that really, we did an exhibit at the end of the year.
Yes,
right? We gathered up all their, kind of a lot of their projects and had a show here. So it was an interesting, it was an easy transition because we were transitioned anyway into a new way of doing things. So then when we got back to in person, we held a lot of classes as long as we could outside, because there was a lot of beer there.
And now you're indoors.
Now we're indoors, yeah. And we're fully back, and we've got usually 15 to 20 kids every week for class.
Cool.
Next week, we're actually going to tour the Firehouse and tour my studio. So we're going to bring the kids out and show them around, because they haven't seen it.
Very cool. I also wanted to share, Joyanna did a program through the Firehouse and supported by Niwot Rotary at Indian Peaks Elementary. And really it was kind of a,
it was like an artist in residence program for the kids at Indian Peaks. So I taught art there for them. I was there 6 total days. And they have their classes, each grade level is split into 3 different classes. So I did each class twice. So we did kind of a 2-part project with each class. And they were projects inspired by Mexican handicrafts and artesanía. So we did like nichos. We made little boxes. We did some corn husk dolls. We did, what were the other projects we did? We made like little paper mache,
leather,
alebrijes.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and we did leather painting.
Uh-huh.
So which was kind of a take on the bark paintings. We used leather. We talked a lot about the origin of paper and how people have been painting for like, I can't remember the dates now, but like 50,000 years or something like that. They're the oldest paintings we've seen, and the paper's been around for 2,000 years. So what did people paint on before there was paper? Because that's all they ever paint on is paper. So we talked about that. And there's a big Mexican mural tradition we talked about. Painting on walls. We didn't paint on any walls yet, but I'm working on that part. I'd love to do a mural project eventually with them, but their art teacher, their full-time art teacher, had been on maternity leave for quite a while, so she was on long-term leave. And their art teacher now is awesome. She finds the best project, but she has no art training at all. So she was really glad to see me, and the kids were amazing. They loved it. So it was a really great program.
Did you teach that one also bilingually as well?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah, for the most part, they all understand English, and because there are kids in the classes that don't speak Spanish, English was the one language that pretty much everybody understood. There were a couple kids that needed the Spanish too, but it was another, they knew they could speak anything to me, and it was comfortable. So
Very
that
cool.
was good.
So, and I also wanted to, I think it's on camera. Maybe you can kind of see the boat behind you. Do you want to?
So that was a community project. These vintage sailboats, I've actually got 2 of them that were given to me, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them, but it's part of the whole water theme and the being displaced kind of theme. A couple weeks ago, I did a community project where I had this boat out in the kind of the common area in my building, and I invited passersby to add to it. And the theme was something that represents someone you miss. So we had people that it was a really interesting experience for me, because when people come in and you hand them a paintbrush and paint, most people are like, oh no, I can't paint. But as soon as I said we're doing this as a tribute to those people we miss, like my son moved to Pittsburgh and he was away for a long time, and I miss my son, so it doesn't have to be someone that necessarily has passed on, but just who are you missing? And as soon as I said that, people went, well, yeah, I am. And one gentleman, I asked him what he was working on it for quite a while, and I asked him, do you mind telling me about what you're doing? And he's like, I really was feeling I was missing my dad today. And he's just like, it's weird that this is going on and I'm running into this, but it was really cathartic for him, and for a lot of people, I think, that contributed to it. And there's room for more. I want to keep that going. It has a whole other side. I have a whole other boat, so that project is going to continue, because I think it's really helpful to ask people, who are you? What are you thinking about right now? I think so many of us are walking around just missing someone all the time, and that's not something you say to people when they ask you how you are. So yeah, I think it's helpful, and to me, it's helpful. So that's what that project was about.
Very cool. And in your bio, as I was reading it, I know everyone's holding a ceramic, are these, you call them petals, right?
I call them, like hand petals, palm petals. I don't know why petals are rather than shells or whatever, but so I started doing some things with ceramic. I used to work a lot in ceramic before my high school capstone project was in ceramic, and I always, I've worked a lot in ceramic, and so I was making ornaments, and I'm always kind of looking for different things to paint on, what you can kind of acrylic on anything, but what can you really watercolor on, because it requires a porous surface in order to grip the pigment, because it doesn't have a binder like acrylic and oil does. The binder is gum arabic or honey in some cases, and when you get that wet, it basically dissolves away. So it's not like it holds the pigment in place. It's not sticky like acrylic and oil. So I worked on like ornament blanks that I've bought and put, there's this, it's kind of like a gesso for watercolor. It's called watercolor ground, and it creates that porous kind of clay-like surface, and it will stick to non-porous surfaces. So I've made like metal ornaments and wood ones and plastic ones and things, and just as long as you put the watercolor ground down first, you can watercolor on it. And then I was at one of the Summer on the Streets events last summer, and I was next to a potter. And she's like, well, why don't you make, because I was talking to her about how I like ceramics and stuff. She's like, why don't you make your ornaments out of clay? Why don't you make your own? And I'm like, why don't I make my own? That's a great idea. So I'm a monitor here for the ceramic studio here at Firehouse. And so I come in once a week and I sit and I make so I shape these all in my own hand. So they're kind of the shape of a hand. They're all different shapes. Some of them are round, some of them are, but they're all shaped, and I take a lot of time making them very smooth. I try to make them as smooth, I use my own skin and smooth them out as much as I can. So then and then they're bisque fired, so they're only fired once. And this particular kind of clay vitrifies completely at the bisque fire, so it's not like it's not.
It's as sturdy.
It would hold water, yeah. So, and then I take them, I don't glaze them, but I take them and I watercolor them. And most of these are, I mean, I can paint things on them too, which I have, but these, I put the paint in them and I let the water evaporate. So it just leaves the pigment where it leaves it. And I played a lot with different colors and combinations and they're all different. And then on the backs, I've got this big like cutting mat, so I just get it all wet and I put a bunch of pigment down and just let them sit in it, and then just leave them to dry overnight. So the watermarks are all there, and then I wax them. Like when I finish my watercolors, most traditionally watercolors are put behind mats and then behind glass for framing. Hate glass. It is heavy to transport, it breaks, and I do a lot of festivals and fairs and things like that. So I learned about this process called wax. Well, it involves waxing watercolors. So I use Gamblin cold wax medium. It's a combination of beeswax and Gamsol solvent. So you can put it down. I basically use my hands and I rub it into the surface of paper. And then I mount them on the watercolors, the paper watercolors. So I mount them on board for framing. So you can pop them into a frame like you would an oil painting. And they don't require glass. So that's the same stuff that I use on the ceramics to hold the pigment in. Because if you held this for a long time and it wasn't sealed, you'd get pigment all over your hand. The water in your hand would loosen the pigment and it would wear off. But because they're waxed, then I can polish them and make them really even more smooth. So that's how these are finished. And I do the same thing with my paper watercolors as well. So.
Very cool. I did not know that, like, it makes sense now that I didn't know that you, like, just put it in there, the pigment, and then you
I just let it let the water evaporate. Really cool. So these are made with water too. And then the idea behind these, I really wanted something that I could hand to kids that come into my booth, like a real live piece of art that will break if you drop it. Like I wanted something to be able to hand out. And I sell them. I mean, I've got $18 price tag on them or whatever. But I think I wanted something that they could hold, they could take with them, that was from an artist, like made by an artist, and I. Also, it helps me. I keep one in my car. I just kind of hold onto it almost like a worry stone. Because it was shaped in a hand, I want it to kind of feel like you're holding someone's hand when you're holding onto these, in an effort to kind of salve someone you're missing. Again, that same theme is here too. So I made a whole bunch of them and made this thing to kind of look like water.
And it does. It's very successful.
It was very successful.
Yeah.
That's a piece of corrugated roofing plastic. It's made for roofing, and I torched it and put some alcohol ink, rubbed alcohol ink on it. That's why it's got a little blue kind of a tint to it, but it was effective. I was trying to figure out how to display these, and that was really kind of did what I wanted it to do. So, but these are meant to be picked up and handled. I wanted it to be a very interactive piece of the exhibit so that people, know they can handle them and see the other, turn them over and see what the other sides look like, and move them around and stuff. So, yeah.
Does the wax change the color?
No, not really. No, it doesn't have I don't really notice the effect. It's matte, so it maintains the kind of matte. You couldn't use it with pastel. I mean, it only works with watercolor because it's pretty stable already. Sometimes when I'm waxing, sometimes these have a buildup of pigment. Like if I put too much of it on, when it evaporates, there's like this one even, I think you can tell there's kind of a space here where there was too much pigment. So then when I rub the wax on it, it brushed some of the pigment off. But with these, I don't necessarily finish the paintings. That doesn't happen because there's not a thickness of pigment. It's all kind of sunken down already into the paper. But with these, it sits up on top a little more. So sometimes some of the pigment does come off when I wax them.
You can do that, some kind of technique with acrylics.
Yeah.
To seal them.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to seal acrylics,
Right.
But it's a nice.
It can give it a nice, it's like even kind of, especially with the reflection. Acrylic can be really reflective. It can be shiny, and if a lot of times you get a more vibrant kind of depth of color if it's a matte surface and you don't have reflection, you don't have glare, then, and so varnishing can be helpful even for acrylic, but it makes them also waterproof, so you could hang a watercolor in a bathroom if you wanted to, so which I wouldn't recommend otherwise.
So you've mentioned community a lot, and I wanted to give you a chance to kind of just talk about some of the other organizations that you are a part of. So EBCA, what is that? East
Boulder County Artists is the organization in the eastern part of Boulder County, including Longmont, Lafayette, and Louisville, Niwot. We hold an open studio tour every year. It has always been a volunteer organization, and a few years ago when Arts Longmont dissolved, the Arts Longmont used to do the Longmont studio tour in fall, and EBCA did a studio tour in the spring. So most of the artists in these communities were used to 2 tours a year. And then when Arts Longmont dissolved, EBCA kind of said, if you're an Arts Longmont artist, then you can come be part of our organization. And we went through COVID and all that stuff. There was a lot of switching of leadership, and couldn't have tours for a couple of years and things like that. We did other things, but we're trying to kind of get our feet under us again.
When is that, the tours?
Our studio tour is coming up at the end of April. It's the 29th and 30th. Got 50 artists involved again, which we were struggling to get 30 for the last couple of years, so we were all very excited about that. Some of them are here with us today. And so we're you'll look for the yellow signs all over our communities, so we're putting into the open studios.
And then the maps?
The maps will come out this week.
Okay.
Yeah. You can find them at the library.
And here.
You can find them here. We're going to have our preview show at the 8Z building, which is on Main Street. I think it's 324.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
No, 325. Thank you. 325. Main Street is going to be our preview show. That opening will be the second Friday in April, so the 14th will be the opening for that, and everyone's invited to that. We'll also have an opening at Louisville Library on the 7th, Friday the 7th, and a lot of artists will be set up with kind of little displays and stuff too, so they'll be selling things at the library in Louisville on the 7th. And then we'll have display at the Longmont Library as well. So you can find maps at a lot of businesses all over town. You can find them at Old Town Marketplace. But it shows you where everybody, and they're also online. So ebcacolorado.org is our website. You can find it there too.
Nice. And I wanted to make sure that we had time for questions. We do. So, as far as like dreams, goals, wishes, what's up next? Do you have anything that I guess?
There's always things. Yeah. Well, Summer in the Streets is coming up, so second Saturdays I'll have my tent out. Most of them throughout the summertime. I'm really interested in what we can. I don't know how we can grow EBCA, how we can support artists in the community, how we can reach more people in the community, because a lot of people don't know this community is full of artists, and they don't understand. I don't know. We work really hard to make that not the case, but still, it's always. We're always working towards that. We had for the first time, a holiday show the weekend of Thanksgiving. Last year that was really successful. We had 35 artists in one of the vacant buildings downtown. It was really, we got a lot of great feedback from the community about that event. So we're hoping to continue that and grow that. Love to do an art in the park someday here in Longmont. And other things. I mean, we can, I think there's a lot of need and desire in the community for having more presence of artists and more opportunities for artists and artist development and venue space and things like that. So,
but then also artist connection to the community.
Right.
So I know that you're starting a art for newbies program.
That's true. Once a month, I'm going to do a little kind of, I'm going to call it How to Like Art. It's going to be a little class for people who see people going to openings and doing things and always kind of we're interested in the art world, but it's really intimidating to come to an opening even at Firehouse, which is very community oriented and everybody kind of knows each other, and if you're walking in and everybody's talking and it's just kind of like, what do you ask? What kind of questions do you ask? And if you see some of the more contemporary work that isn't a painting, it's more multimedia, it's more abstract, how do you even look at that and why is there a gold toilet in the Guggenheim? Like things like that. I want to kind of reach out to people that don't know where to start, like how to go to an opening and what kind of questions to ask, and maybe have a glass of wine and ask all the questions that you're afraid to ask otherwise. Make it a really kind of there are no bad questions, and make it okay to say, I don't really like this. This is not my thing, and that's okay. That's completely legitimate. And so I'm going to be teaching, having kind of it's not really teaching it, but inviting people to ask questions once a month here at Firehouse. So that's going to start in May.
Cute.
Kind of a tour, but yeah. So that's something else that's coming up.
Very cool. So one last question, and then I will pass it off to the crowd to ask their questions. I guess it's a two-parter. But one, what is your greatest passion? And let's just start with that. What is your greatest passion? Oh, and I guess the second part is there anything else that you haven't shared?
I think my greatest passion is using art as a tool to make life easier on everyone. What do people really need and inside that they're not getting from capitalist societies, or the education system, or what are you missing in your family? What are you missing in how can art help with that? How can you see a piece of art and that can speak to you in a way that you can see yourself in it? That's one reason why I don't paint people actual skin colors. I paint them abstract colors because I want anyone from any walk of life to be able to look at those figures and see themselves in it if it's the kind of situation that would speak to them.
That pink one is me.
The pink one?
Yes, the one right there.
Yeah. And that's probably my biggest passion, is just to be able to allow people to connect with parts of themselves and see themselves in something that's not necessarily, I don't know, filling a little hole. Maybe that's something they're missing. I don't know that there's anything else
Okay.
that I haven't said.
Perfect. So we'll open up for questions. So
Yeah, I really want to hear about the work. And I noticed that I haven't been able to look real, but they all have names on them. So are they specific stories?
They kind of, a lot of them are. Yeah, they all are. There are 8 paintings in the room now. Some of them, they each have kind of a feeling. This one, I'll start with this one. That a friend of mine, I found out that they were undocumented and said to them, well, how'd you get here? And they said, I walked. And that was just, it just hit me. And I know a lot more about the story, but, when I came here from Ohio, I drove my 3 kids at the time, and it took 3 days, and one of them got sick, so it took us a little longer, and we had a car, and we went about as far, but that just kind of, and we can go back, and a lot of people that I know can't, and they miss family, and to get family to come visit here is a years-long process because they can't just get a passport like we get in 6 months or 4 months or whatever. It takes years. So I know a lot of people who haven't seen their immediate families in many, many years, and a lot of them their parents have been deported. This one also is related to that because I taught a lot of kids who, like, one kid one time said to me, my dad's in jail, and I haven't seen my dad in a long time. And a lot of them, their parents would go back and forth. A lot of the families are migrant families, and so they move around a lot. And this is called resilience because the kids are so great at just, it's painful and it's hard, but they still go out and play at recess, and they still, their lives are just different. But they're still great lives, so that's part of what that's about, There's kind of an ache there, but they're still playing in the water, splashing around and being kids. The ones over there are kind of more personal. One of them is about specifically COVID, the one with the window, being closed in our houses and not feeling like just wanting out, wanting to get out and not being able to. The other one, the reflection, to me is kind of about the tree is kind of representing like a universal kind of humanness, even though it's a tree, it's not a human. Trees to me, I use a lot of trees in a lot of the paintings that I do because they are very universal. I mean, everybody's kind of sat under a tree. Everybody in every culture knows what a tree is and has stood next to a tree and seen sunlight come through the branches of a tree, and it's a very universal kind of experience. So I use that as a symbol in a lot of the paintings that I do. That one, do you have a question?
Well, no, that's what I was going to say. Like, as far as like, one of the first questions about the maternal thing, like maternal and life giving, and the tree of life, and the roots and things like that. I see a lot of.
There's a lot of symbolism that way too. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the roots and the branches and how families, your kids are grounded, but they branch out and they move away and things like that. That one is kind of the most dire of all of them, and that is related to things, losing people that are close to us, things happening to people that we have no control over whatsoever, and there's nothing we can do about it. We just can. It's just a devastating kind of a feeling. So that's what that one's about. This was inspired by the border. The border waters and people crossing and not being able to cross. There's people on one side and not on the other. This one is more kind of about it could be looked at as drowning, but it's like I didn't paint it that way. I wanted it to be, I feel comfortable in water. I feel very serene and peaceful in water like that, and I tend to, when I'm around water, just submerge myself completely and just float, and it's a very freeing and refreshing and life kind of giving kind of a feeling. So that's what that one's about for me.
And that one is
The bubbles.
What is the title of it?
Flotante, which means buoyant. Yeah. And this one's maybe the opposite of that. That's kind of like feeling like you're up to your neck and there's nothing you can do about it. No. Being on the edge, limite, is like the limits, the outer limits of what you're able to handle. And I think a lot of people are feeling that way, with financially, honestly, working as hard as you can, just barely staying above water. So that's visual of that. I think that's a summary. I think a lot of people, when we did the opening, will see things and they see completely different things than I painted, which is completely legitimate, and I don't want to say, well, this painting is about this. Paintings are never really, that's not what they do. People see different things in the paintings, and that's important too. So.
Thank you. And the sculptures are yours also?
Yeah. Again, just figures. I am constantly kind of representing figures and different emotions that I'm feeling and people I know are feeling. And so there, a lot of them are pretty emotive, but I wanted to, that's the other thing I make out of ceramic is I started doing little figures because they kind of like the figures in my paintings. They're just emotive, expressive. So that's why I do those. And then the same process with the watercolor. They're bisque fired and then watercolored and waxed.
Anyone else?
So when you're going to do the education class, is it going to be based on what's in the gallery?
We'll talk about what's in the gallery. Yep, I absolutely want to kind of go through the gallery and just let people ask, why is this, so there's a bunch of yarn wrapped around a stick. Explain that to me, and I'm not the artist, and I don't want to speak for the artist at all because I don't. That's one thing I don't want. I'm looking at it as a spectator, and as a spectator, I think about things like, well, what is the process meditative? Is the process what's important to me? Like as a spectator, do I value this because I can see
The skill
that's involved, or the time that's involved, or the repetitiveness of what a lot of it. Some of the mark making kinds of art and have like the process is really, really important. And like there's Agnes Martin trying to make, you know, something as flat as possible. Like, you know, there's just an artist can be really interested in the like most minute kind of detail, and that's what keeps them making the same thing over and over and over again. And that's what I kind of want to get across, is why an artist works the way an artist might work. And I think there's an understanding there that when you look at a Pollock, you're not necessarily going, well, I could, you know, it's like Olivia. You ever read the Olivia books when Olivia goes to the museum? And Olivia's like looking at a Pollock and she's like, I could do that in about 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then she goes home and she does on the wall with the paint and gets in a lot of trouble. But why was Pollock's work, you know, why was that so groundbreaking, and why is he so famous, and, you know, why do we appreciate that kind of work? What historically was the significance of that, you know, of abstract expressionism? And I studied a lot about all different kinds of art, and I'm always looking into things and reading about things like that. So it's all very, I feel like I'm qualified to share that with, you know. And I'm also, you know, I don't come from a family of artists. I know the people ask me a lot, you know, my family and people I know will ask me a lot, why is this, you know, why is there a gold toilet in the Guggenheim? Why was that? Why was that such a movement? It's found as far as found object art, and, you know, why did Warhol paint Campbell soup cans? You know, stuff like that. I find all of it fascinating, which is, I feel like, why I can. It's always interesting to me why did somebody do that? So I think it'd be fun to explore that kind of thing.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so we are going to move the chairs really, really quick. And if you wanted to walk the space, this is kind of the time to walk the space and have like an artist tour. If you have any questions, feel free to ask Joyanna. And yeah, we'll just move these chairs really fast. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.